the love and hope that we wish in. Yeah, seek and find where the unity resides. Seek and find where divinity resides. Lost myself above the heavens, came back to earth to find the sevens. What I know is not at all, and what I see is not at fault. What we fight for our perception, 'cause we are the change. Yeah, we are the change, we are the change. Inspire, inspire the change. Inspire, inspire the change. Inspire, inspire the Conquer all the inner battles, the darkest demons lie in the shadows. Once we defeat the wars we face, become the warriors guided by grace. Destruction, corruption, this brainless malfunction will all be solved. Inspire, inspire the change. Inspire, inspire the change. Inspire, inspire the
You're listening to 90.1 KPFT. This is Freethinker Radio. You just heard the song Inspire by Metanoia, and they are a local Houston band. You can catch them as soon as all this craziness is over. I'm sure that we'll be playing shows. And they just released a music video. I'm sitting here with Derrick and Micah. What do you guys think of the song?
I think it's pretty cool that at this time they've got something positive coming out, as you're pointing out also. But also I thought it's interesting because we've seen, even on Mid-Press News, there's an article about mutual aid groups and how much that is happening now in the face of no support. So I think that what they're doing is good. It seems to underpin a larger movement of people recognizing that people aren't getting very much help here.
Yeah, they're a band who's usually out there on the front lines. You know, they have their opinions about immigration issues and different things like that. So,
well, I'm glad we can share that music, Johnny.
For sure.
And for those who are watching, of course, you got to actually see the music video, and everybody else who's listening on 90.1 KPFT. This is our, I guess, third or fourth week away from the radio station as things are quarantined. So once again, we are recording a little bit ahead of time. We're recording for you on a Monday night. You'll be hearing this on a Friday afternoon. Those of you who are watching the video, you're going to be seeing it in the middle of the week. And if you do hear this on the radio, but maybe you want to go back and actually see some of the articles on screen that we're talking about, you can go to the Conscious Resistance YouTube channel. You can go Freethinker Radio on Facebook and the Conscious Resistance on Facebook as well. And we're getting all those videos out there. We're showing the videos. We're showing the articles. And if you want, you can see the three of us spread around the world talking here on Freethinker Radio. But yeah, man, what's anything new in the hood, Johnny? Anything going on in Houston that you want to share, or just anything that, you know, in your quarantine experience?
Things have been pretty stagnant, to be honest, over here. Just continuing in the garden and, you know, continuing to take whatever work I can get, just like so many other people. I got a lot of friends that are waiting on those unemployment checks still. A lot of people are still waiting on the stimulus checks and all that kind of stuff. So just hearing a lot of the musicians around town waiting for those checks, because many of them do have jobs like stagehands, and they're needing that money right now.
Johnny, I wanted to mention something to you and to the audience, just for those who are at home but still looking to get plugged in. A friend of mine, she's based in Colorado, and she sent out a message. She's trying to put together like a kind of seed saver type program all around the country. And for anybody who's interested, the website is coopgardens.org. That's COOP gardens.org. And what she wrote was, I encourage those who are looking at potentially starting a chapter in their hometown to sign up and join our planning calls over the coming weeks. The project was launched by the Environmental Farm Network based in Philly, but it is very non-hierarchical, giving everyone a freedom to organize uniquely to fit their community. We have several areas where people can get involved, including tech and logistics, outreach, media, education, fundraising, herbalism, health, safety, and much more. But it's basically a co-op for helping people build gardens in different communities and, getting everybody some source of food. Because I think we talked about this last week, Micah, and I know we've seen more of it, that there's record number of people going to food banks around the country. People who've never been to a food bank before are now having to visit them because they don't have food or they're running out of money and things of that sort. So it really reemphasizes what we've talked about here for years: community garden, urban farming, kind of localizing the food production system.
Sure. I'm kind of glad you mentioned that, because that's something that I didn't have a lot of articles brought up, because we only have an hour to talk to people today. But I did see so much about it. I saw one food bank in San Antonio serves 10,000 families. Think about that. 10,000 families are like that destitute, that far from a paycheck, that they are going to food banks. You see pictures of through the media around the country of some of these food banks with mile-long lines, and at the same time you see milk producers and others having to throw food away, which is really alarming because obvious reasons, but also these are symptoms of a breakdown in distribution and other aspects of the economy that people might not think of directly when the restaurant next to them closes, or shuts down, during quarantine or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But, I got some other Houston news if you want to.
Well, I want to comment on that real quick, Micah, if you don't mind. That I think that, and Johnny, you said this last time, getting people to get involved locally, like let's grow gardens together as much as possible during, social distancing or whatever. But for example, where we're at here in Mexico, right around the corner from the place we're staying, there's a local fruit stand. And this guy has got papayas and pineapples and melons and watermelons and all kinds of great stuff. And we talked to him and asked him, like, are you changing your hours? He basically said, no, I'm here every day till 10 p.m. no matter what. But either way, we got his phone number and said, look, if for some reason you are forced to shut down, please, we're going to reach out to you because we still want to buy your product. Because what's happening, what you're talking about, Micah, is the farmers now are growing all these crops, or they're, getting milk from cows that would typically go to schools. Well, all the schools are out. Nobody's going to school, high school, college, junior high. So all that stuff's just getting poured over. The plants are just getting mowed over because they don't have anything to do with them. But if we had these networks where we weren't so dependent on the grocery stores, you could still just call the farmer directly and say, hey, I want to come get some produce from you. And so I just think it's so important for people to build those relationships while we have the opportunity.
And there's other instances. What you're bringing up is entirely true. What else happens that people don't often think of is like the milk producers that I talked about. They're actually prohibited from selling their product directly to the public. So there are like contracts and stuff that prohibit some distribution in certain ways. But then there's also legal ramifications, like, where they can't sell raw milk, different things like that. In diverse food industries, because we have so much regulation on the food at this point that it is hard for farmers to sell their food. I do think that now, people talking about don't get in groups more than whatever, but it would seem to me that farmers markets are essential businesses and that people have to eat food, and that's probably a really good thing to be doing. And I think, obviously this isn't the final Free Thinker Radio or anything crazy, but now's the time that, Johnny was talking about a lot of his friends, a lot of people he knew are waiting for these checks. I understand that, but we don't want to be victims at the same time, and we want to be able to do something about this. So if we can spend our money at these people as much as possible instead of at the big stores, it's the same story again, but maybe put in under a pressure cooker because of the situation.
Yeah, we're definitely out here trying to support as many local, as much of the local Mexican economy as possible right now, because people are, particularly right here, because, things are, you could see it like we're a couple of weeks behind. Things are still open. School's closed, but most businesses are open. People are out driving around and going on, but you're definitely seeing that they are very much in need of customers. There's some spots that are emptying out. And today, I guess one of the things I wanted like us to explore, I know we got a lot of news to cover. Not all of it's related to coronavirus, thankfully, but it's interesting just to see the different ways that certain countries are handling this. Like Sweden, right? They still have refused to lock down. They're being shamed and admonished by the international community, but they have refused to lock down their people. They have minimum cases. Some would say, well, that's going to change. We'll have to wait to see, but it's just interesting. Okay, so Johnny, one of the things I wanted to get into, though, is I noticed earlier this week on social media, you'd shared something with your friends. And Micah, I know you saw it. It sort of erupted into a heated discussion of different opinions. And I think that's important for us to talk about, because you didn't really say anything too controversial, but it seemed to offend or trigger a lot of people. So why don't you share a little bit about that, about what you were trying to get at?
Yeah, I just brought up the fact that, 60,000 people die per year of the flu. And I was kind of getting at the fact that a lot of people were projecting numbers of 200,000 deaths for the week. And I saw lower numbers than that. And I was pretty much asking the question, is this government reaction still warranted at this quarantine level? Like, should we still be fining people and jailing people for, going out and trying to do business or do whatever they need to do when should we hand that back over to the people and maybe like start letting people be more responsible for their own actions and more responsible for their own health? And everyone was going crazy about it. They thought that I was against the quarantine necessarily, which I'm not necessarily against quarantining if you want to do that and if that's how you choose to protect yourself, but everyone was just coming at me with different theories. It got brought into 5G and different things like that. And I started looking into it more, and I saw that a lot of the deaths have been ramped up basically because they're being very liberal on the way they're calling these deaths in the hospitals and stuff. So most of the people here, or most of the people that are dying have 1 to 3 different underlying conditions that could have also caused their death. What is this? Mises.org. There's an article. We're putting it up here. Dr. Burks was saying that we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality. I think the reporting here has been very straightforward over the past 5 to 6 weeks. Prior to that, when there wasn't testing in January and February, that's a very different situation and unknown. Now, if someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death. So you could see how that would add to numbers or potentially add to this. What people would see is how severe this is.
Well, and so in the same article we're looking at, Johnny, and for those who are watching the video, you can see it on screen. We see that it wasn't even just a statement by Deborah Birx, which, by the way, for those who are unaware, she's part of the White House's COVID-19 task force. But the CDC themselves, they send out instruction to medical staff around the country. We even had a doctor who's also a senator in Minnesota speak out and publish the 7-page document where the CDC is basically instructing them to, on the death certificate, put COVID-19 if the disease caused or, quote, is assumed to have caused or contributed to the death. And like you mentioned, in places like Italy and some other places where there have been pretty heavily hit, there also seems to be perhaps environmental factors, pollution, things of that sort. I actually have an interview coming up with a woman from MIT, a researcher, Stephanie Seneff. She just published this really great piece too that also was mentioning that a lot of the areas that are being hit the hardest are near waterways where there's potential for high glyphosate runoff from Roundup, so pesticides. And she's saying that could be playing a role in hurting people's immune systems and leading to more deaths as well. So there's just so many factors, right? And I think that from what I saw from the conversation, all you did was just kind of ask a question like, hey, should we just be blindly submitting to this when the numbers aren't as high as we were told? And it seemed like that was very offensive to some people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting seeing the reactions that you get in these sort of times. Often some of the people that seem so ready to stand up for the individual without recognizing it aren't standing up for the individual at all, but really more like defending a kind of a herd mentality off the cuff, right? The first response. But I think, like Derrick said, I do think these conversations are important because otherwise, what do we have? I mean, if you look on the media, you've got the same story and then some sort of happy stories every once in a while to make us think we're not going crazy in our homes or something. But yeah, I think it's important because it also, as I was saying, it makes the distinction between the actions taken by the politicians, the actions taken in regards to closing down businesses and limiting, rights that the people have, versus the disease itself and what that disease does. Like I'm thinking here in Houston, I mean, we can't even go to the parks. I mean, a lot of people think that's a silly thing to whine about, but for some reason, that thing really hit me a little bit more driving by and seeing them closed off and stuff. I mean, because there's other places we can go and be outside, but it just, you feel like you're a kid or something. And I think that's a big thing to remember is that it wasn't necessarily COVID on the park bench that made me not be able to go into the park.
Johnny, I think it was kind of odd to me, or I guess like my question to you is, were your friends interpreting your questioning or sort of even challenging the quarantine as like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist? Or was it just that they have been so afraid of the virus that anybody even challenging the quarantine, needs to be shouted out?
It was just a lot of back and forth. Like a lot of people would be angry just at the idea that we should end it anytime early because they're thinking that it's going to save lives. And then I saw on the other hand, my friend who, has a daughter and a wife, but no work, and his landlord's expecting rent. So he's saying he might end up homeless. So a lot of people are going back and forth about like, it's a complicated issue. A lot of people have different reactions to it, and a lot of people are kind of begging for an answer. But I think that we need to be a little bit smarter about it and not just accept that the government has, the complete right solution with this quarantine when the numbers don't pan out and there are real losses for continuing the quarantine. Like there are some other real deaths, or not necessarily deaths, but lives that are going to be seriously affected, if not, changed for, the next 5 years to come.
Another thing is I was thinking in the car, war ends lives, war kills people. People aren't clamoring out to stop the wars. What the hell, Not really.
I think that people made some good comparisons about that, saying like, we don't stop the world for car wrecks. We don't stop the world for tuberculosis. And for a lot of these illnesses that at the moment are killing more people. Perhaps, it's too early to say. The infection rate is high, or it seems to be high with COVID-19. So over time, it could take a lot of lives. I don't want people to think we're making light of the situation, but we're definitely always going to push back and challenge the sort of assumption that we should just listen to the government edicts without challenging and without questioning. Especially, I know we got a lot of things to cover. Some of them include things like immunity passports, surveillance to track you by your cell phone to determine if you've been near people who are infected. I mean, these are things that are being considered in the United States of America.
I saw some protests for it, and it was kind of ironic because it's just more Facebook drama. But, I commented I didn't think it was such a terrible idea to go out there and just say, and just let people know that. And then I saw, even some members of the music scene sharing that, actually making fun of it, saying like, have fun getting this virus, like, you know, staying home saves lives, just that same rhetoric that we continue hearing, where it's like, it's so funny because I feel like most people who are going to stay home, they were going to stay home, you know, like a lot of the people who wanted to quarantine and wanted to help out or be a part of that, like you should absolutely have the freedom to do that. And I'm sure a lot of workplaces and things would have complied. But we don't necessarily need to get a fine for it. Like, whose job is that to force us to do that? Is it a civil duty, or is it, you know, do we need to get the law involved? Like, because some people think that people aren't smart enough to take their own precautions, and that's the problem. I happen to disagree, because most of this hasn't even been enforced too much. If you really think about it, like, people aren't getting, you know, at least in Houston, I'm not seeing people necessarily getting picked off the streets, maybe kicked out of the parks, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think this is also setting a precedent, you know?
Yeah, that's the huge problem with it, for sure, because they could pull it back out later.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into some of these stories, Micah. I know you had some local things you wanted to cover, and then we've got a few. And, of course, you're listening to Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston. We're here with you every Friday, and we'll be here with you throughout the quarantine. We are recording a couple of days before Friday, so we're not bringing you the latest news, but if you do want to stay up with the latest news, you would like to follow our Facebook, Freethinker Radio, also get some more music at Visionary Noise on Facebook, and, of course, the Houston Freethinkers on Facebook. All those places you can see new articles that we cover and talk about throughout the week when we're not here on KPFT. But what do we got going on locally, Micah?
Well, there's all kinds of things still going on in the news in Houston. I saw in the Chronicle that they say that shutdown of the schools here has sent educators and the bureaucracy scrambling for hotspots, basically. And I imagine that we're going to see this culminate in a scream for more 5G at the schools, et cetera. But turns out that wireless hotspots are in an enormous demand and teleclassing, et cetera. Short supply, local leaders are looking to help lower income students connect to online learning amid the pandemic. And several district officials and tech leaders are speaking about the need, hotspots, basically just trying to get them from everywhere. And they say that they're looking for more than 100,000 eventually. It's a number of students that will be connecting that lack broadband internet at home. So, I think as we see the effects of this, just trickle into all these different aspects of life, another aspect of it that I thought was kind of interesting, maybe people don't think much about, is I know you're going to be sad, Derrick. The XFL, I know how you're a football fan, files bankruptcy. It turns out that, and this is how it's all interconnected, they owe the University of Houston $300,000. But that's not all they owe. They owe a whole bunch of their coaches money. But it turns out that UH, which leased out office space and a stadium for the Roughnecks home games, is owed $294,461.90 in unsecured claims for venue costs. So, we're going to see a lot of different sort of small industries, small things not able to handle being gone very long at all. This is interesting because it's right here in Houston. Turns out that the Roughnecks coach is actually owed even more money, $583,333. So, they say they averaged 18,230 fans for 3 home games at the stadium, which ranked third in 8-team league. So they're gone now. Thought that was interesting.
So
and
the XFL didn't
another
last
one
long.
that No, it's gone. Are you sad? This one will make you sad if that one didn't. Turns out that a whole lot of the local, obviously, what do you got to say? The local economy is being hurt. But it turns out that the small wine importers and distributors in Houston are being hit particularly hard by the pandemic, they say. And I don't know if you want to say the pandemic or the reactions of the public to it, because I'm not sure that the pandemic is dropping so many of their clients off.
I thought alcohol was doing well in Texas. I saw them just open a new Sprite, so people should be buying local wines instead.
Yeah. They basically, I guess it's just like under, so I guess these importers are in the same situation. Some of these shops, these import shops, have been dealing wine in Houston for 20 years, such as Scopes. They say their sales, because of restaurants being closed, are down 90%. I imagine that's where they, do drink a lot of nicer wines. Yeah, you can still get your other stuff at the Kroger. That's good stuff. And you can also, can't go to Eighth Wonder, can't go to our local breweries. Yeah, I saw this editorial in Houston Chronicle, and then I'm going to back off for a little bit because I think those were some of the most prevalent local stories. Then later, I'd like to get into talking about the CARES Act and, how it sort of discriminates where money's going, et cetera. But nonetheless, there's an editorial in the Chronicle, and I think you guys will love the headline. It's not as, its bite isn't as bad as its bark, but the headline's interesting. FEMA, don't desert Houston in coronavirus battle. And I think that's just more what we'll see as these things maybe come by every season or every other season or maybe every fifth season or maybe every season that's preceded by 6 months of bankster heists occurring beforehand, and manipulations and QE, et cetera, that they can't hide anymore. Maybe then this will happen again. But yeah, so this was pretty interesting. They're basically saying that there's FEMA people here helping with the testing, and we can't afford to not have them here. So FEMA, don't desert Houston during the coronavirus.
Yeah, I see. I think it's interesting that they're calling it a war too, Micah. Like the first line, it says, "Imagine going to war without intelligence reports, without surveillance, without spies on the inside. If the battle against the novel coronavirus is a war, as President Trump says it is, we are fighting blind." So it's again part of that whole message that we're in a war, this invisible enemy. We need to fight it like a war. We need to use resources like a war.
Yeah, entirely. You're entirely right there, Derrick. And I think that's part of, keeping the fear up, keeping the focus up, really. I think it has to be the focus. Like coronavirus is what's causing all this. That has to be the takeaway. And 90, 70, 55%, 20%, whatever, enough to keep the social cohesion to believe that everything that changes, all the new, the stimulus that's bigger than any package ever, all the new draconian measures that we'll get, the law, are all going to be because of the coronavirus. So I think the distinction when it is.
Well, let's go ahead. We've been covering a lot. I think we got us caught up on Houston. Should we hit a quick song break and then come back and dive into, like you said, Micah, the stimulus? And I've got some more surveillance news. Unfortunately, the solutions, as you were just discussing, Micah, are the repercussions really because of the virus, or is it because of the way people are responding to it? And we're going to get into all that. I want to play a song from an old musical friend of mine who I recently reconnected with. We've played him over the years here on Freethinker Radio. It's Jay Soley. He is I guess you could say, a conscious truth hip hop artist. So we're going to play a little bit of him. Check him out. It's Jay Solli. We'll be right back. This is Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston.
So ill. Hostility. Free speech is more powerful than an entire military artillery, cause their weapons don't threaten anyone without the villagers killing willingly. I've got a million civilians feeling my resilient, brilliant, witty ability. When I mention objections to the intention of getting protection for liberty, people get offended, but I'm just trying to protect them from the protection of tyranny. Check my intestines, arrest me without a sentence and give me the guillotine, cause I question getting molested in the name of protection. You feeling me? Cause we don't want you getting out of line. Don't ask any questions, close the eyelids on your mind. Television is your friend even when it lies. Go to school, get a job, eat, sleep, die. Weapon of mass consumption, don't talk about religion, politics, money, Socrates, philosophy, monogamy, fucking astronomy, democracy, anomalies, nothing. Talk about McDonald's, rocking these nuggets in a Walmart, and I'm loving these budgets. American public, this is your puppet, repeat after me, I'm free and I love it. me. I am America, so what's my beef with myself that might reach someone else? When I fill up the tank with gasoline, I'm actually funding half of these catastrophes overseas that are rapidly contributing to tragedies and casualties and other masterpieces happening. Ever since lyrical mastery, I've grasped a different reality outside this galaxy. I'm a fallacy. Challenge me and I'll burn your raps like a calorie. I'm getting off topic gradually and assaulting the mic. Call it battery, cause we don't want you thinking all the time. Real eyes, realize real ass lies. We don't need no education, not if you comply. One nation under the corporation until you die. Pass an act to collect the gats, and then we'll pass an act to arrest the masses. Then we'll pass an act to have natural disasters till it rains gas and lactic acid. Pass an act to get plastic caskets. Pass an act to get the rapture cracking. Pass the hash to switch my rap back from graphic sadness to happy status.
Because I really did, seriously. The artist's name is Jay Solly from jsolly.com. That's J, the letter, SOLLI.com.
So ill.
All right, welcome back to Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston. You just heard Jay Solly. He's a hip-hop artist originally out of Dallas. Not sure what he's doing these days, but if you want to find him, you can find his music all over YouTube. We're going to continue the conversation, which has been talking about how Houston is being affected. Johnny was sharing how some conversations, people might not be open to hearing alternative ideas about the quarantine. But I've got a really scary story that I want to share with everybody, and I'm hoping that those who are watching and listening can really understand why this is important. And if you're watching the video, you can see it on screen. This is coming from Politico. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, just this past Friday, so about a week ago from when you guys are hearing this on KPFT, he discussed the idea of issuing immunity cards. You know, we've heard this idea in the UK. They call them immunity passports. Now they say that immunity cards are being discussed. Fauci says, that's possible when asked whether he could imagine a time when people across the country could carry such forms of identification. He says, it's one of those things that we talk about when we want to make sure that we know who the vulnerable people are and not. This is something that's being discussed. I think it might actually have some merit under certain circumstances. The proposal is contingent upon the widespread deployment of antibody tests which the National Institute of Health and the FDA are in the process of validating. He said, within a period of a week or so, we're going to have a rather large number of tests available. And they basically go on and say, we look forward as we get to the point of at least considering opening up the country. It's very important to appreciate and to understand how much the virus has penetrated society. Immunity certificates are already being implemented by researchers in Germany, and the idea has been floated in the United Kingdom and in Italy, which is the most recent epicenter. In parts of China, citizens are required to display color codes on their smartphones indicating their contagion risk. And the controversial surveillance measure facilitated the end of the lockdown in Wuhan earlier this week. And interesting, I don't know if you guys saw this, but once they ended the lockdown, people exited the country en masse. People literally just started trying to get the heck out of China or out of Wuhan as quick as they could once they ended the lockdown. But yeah, that brings up a lot of weird feelings. You also had the St. Louis Fed president saying that people should have to wear some sort of badge, like the one you get when you vote, to determine whether you've been vaccinated or if you've been found to be, recovered. What do you guys think about this idea?
Scary to me. That just sounds really surreal and kind of, I don't know. It just seems like they're eventually going to discriminate against people who don't want to have maybe a vaccine or an immunity, or it could even be used to ostracize people who have had it or, potentially are at risk.
I think between the Healthcare Act and that there sure is a lot of wanting to get up in our health records. And I start wondering about that, with regard to immunities and the information that the medical industry could use that might be within each of our bodies. And just different things like that's what it makes me think about, because it seems like a relentless desire to get that information about every one of us in lots of different ways. And like Johnny said, maybe you just be deemed unclean. It sounds kind of like a way of maybe developing a case system in some senses too. And if it can be just on your phone and with your Sesame credit system, it can be like, sort of integrated to where sometimes you're just dirty because of a virus. Sometimes you're dirty because of your dirty thoughts. Sometimes, you're dirty because you didn't support the war.
I also think, like, what about the religious people who can't have vaccines? Would they have their own exemptions?
I don't think so, because, we've been having this conversation way before COVID-19, right? And how many people have called into KPFT and basically said that they think that we've had people say that they support the idea of exemptions for vaccinations or people's freedom to choose. But we've also had people call in and say, your individual liberty ends where our collective health begins, and those sort of ideas, that the idea that the herd and the health of the herd is more important than you and your silly freedoms. This is a mentality that I've seen popping up quite a bit. And it's not just with coronavirus, it's with vaccines, it's with anything that relates to health. I've seen where people are kind of conditioned to think that, and I call it conditioned, maybe others would disagree, conditioned to think that we should, suppress the minority, which is the individual, the smallest minority, and in the name of building up the collective, right? And I think that's a very dangerous, scary idea that we've talked about a lot on this show. But immunity passports, digital certificates, Bill Gates is out there pushing these ideas. And we don't even have time to get into this on this show. Maybe next week we'll get into it. But Bill Gates, for those who don't know, he is now the number one funder of the World Health Organization through his billions of dollars and his various institutions. This guy is guiding policy. He's also heavily invested in the vaccine makers. So is Mr. Fauci. He's worked in that industry. There's a lot of conflicts of interest. Even Deborah Birx that you mentioned, Johnny, she's got some conflicts too. It's just important for people to recognize that the situation is not as just clear and cut as we're being told, as far as, there's a virus, the good people are stepping up to the plate to help us. Let's all celebrate Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and the technocrats for saving the world. There's a lot more going on. And I know, Micah, you wanted to get into some of the economic side of things. I just want to reemphasize to people that, like, you're in America, you're hearing this, maybe you're hearing this elsewhere. We have listeners from all around the world. But if you care about freedom, right now, the ideas that are being considered, former Congressman Ron Paul called this the Health Patriot Act or the Medical Patriot Act, because of all the powers that they're trying to grab right now. And it's really important for people to take note of this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of collectivist sort of herd mentality going on. I think it's really revealed. I'm sure it's always been going on, and I'm sure we've all contributed to it in different ways at different times of our lives. But it seems like now and any time of crisis is the least time to have that. Some ideas that are coming out of these people. But yeah, I think that some of the things that have been going by and have other reasons for concern as well, as they get thousands of people and hundreds and I guess millions of people at this point, they say, 10 million more people, what was it? 5 million more people were filed for unemployment over the last 10 days. And to the 10 million that already did the 2 weeks before that. So yeah, the CARES Act, everybody's hearing about the stimulus package, more or less, $2.2 trillion, the largest economic rescue package in history. And I'm sure all the people waiting for their $1,200 are glad to hear and cheer when it goes by. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of political shenanigans that went on with regard to the House version of it that isn't really what we got. But at the same time, I think it's interesting they tried to pass this while yet not get anybody's name on it for approving it and things like that. And I guess when you get into it, one of the things that seems to help besides the 1,200 that, as Johnny mentioned, he knew people were waiting for it, is what a lot of small businesses thought were going to help them is the Paycheck Protection Program. But it turns out that you're going to love it, that the act, much like the Patriot Act, is 880 pages long. And, they wrote this and refined it. And no, they didn't have it just waiting there or something. But yeah, so it turns out that there's going to be funding for hospitals, healthcare, financial aid to state and local governments, $3 billion fund. And, there's all this argument in there for small business protection, paycheck protection, et cetera. I got questions about that, though, because it seems, they offer a low interest loan, but you must get them through the bank. It's all treasury money that must be acquired through banks. They're not putting it through the little banks. They talked about going to do that, but the system isn't there for them to do that. So most of this pay small business money, which is only a fraction of the trillions of dollars in the first place, so that the pieces that people will get are, $1,200. I don't know how long some of these people have been out of work, but $1,200 isn't very much money in today's bills. So I think most of these people have been out of work 2 and 3 weeks. They're talking about extending the unemployment time you can get unemployment. So all that's going to have costs come through at the end. But I do think that it's pretty shocking that they got only a few $1 billion for these small businesses, and 3 days later, the banksters were back there saying, "Well, that's not enough. We need to have another $500 million, $385 billion to loan out more." Then there's articles right now out there about the senators arguing on the floor about it, arguing only about this little $385 billion. They're not arguing about the trillions that they passed, where the big bulk of it goes to the biggest banksters of all. What they're arguing about is the second round of $385 trillion that's supposed to, that's supposed to go to the small businesses. And it's funny because the people that are getting the bulk of this bailout money at the top here, the 1%. I mean, I remember in 2008, people were like occupying Wall Street about Wall Street looting like this. And now I feel like it's kind of with that herd mentality of we need $1,200. Coronavirus caused these problems. We can't stop the economy and it's unnerving. Also, I did see it's
isn't the $1,200 is coming from us anyways, technically.
It's all coming from the people.
It's all coming from taxpayer dollars. And I did hear from a friend today that they got their check today or deposited in the bank or however it works or whatever. But you're right, Micah, $1,200 doesn't go far. I mean, maybe in Houston, because Houston is the lowest income place or one of the lowest income places in the country. But even in Houston, $1,200 isn't going to last you very long. And like you said, Micah, some people have already been out of work for 2-3 weeks, maybe a month already.
My rent downtown for a 3-bedroom is $1,350, so it doesn't cover.
I saw another article that I thought was really interesting on the financial side of things, and I'm not going to get all into it, but I'd like to bring it up and maybe talk about it for a minute, Derrick. And this is this one here. That's not the one, sorry. It's one on BlackRock basically taking charge, and it's more of what we've seen before, and it's more than just the economic enslavement. It's the socialization of the bad debts and the bad gambling that these people have done, and calling it capitalism and saying that they're saving capitalism by looting the treasury, which is, as Johnny pointed out, all the people. And then to keep everybody quiet, here's your $1,200 so that you're I guess almost what's it called? Complicit. You're almost complicit with it. You can still take that $1,200, but know that we're all going to be paying into taxes. These trillions are probably for decades. It's the largest stimulus, and I think. And this article is interesting because if you notice, BlackRock is going to organize a lot of this. We see some names like Larry Fink here and some of the players' names, and it kind of gets into some of the structure of the distribution. We told you they're going to be lining up at the Money and Power trough. I think it's interesting that they have a pig up here at the top, with his finger there saying, be quiet, because you don't hear about BlackRock, right? You hear about the $1,200, you hear about, the masks, you hear about all this, but here's the big trillions of dollars, I don't know, Derrick. I wanted to, kind of get your take on this because I know you're in Mexico, and it's definitely important that, it's kind of like in Freedom to Fascism, where the economic enslavement is part of the goes hand in hand with the loss of civil liberties and the control of the people. Because if you don't have any sort of means, if you don't have a potato, if you don't have the ability to stay alive on your own, then you're a slave in one way. And if you don't have, and obviously a lot of those means have to.
Yeah, Micah, the one thing I want to just comment on, we're getting down to the wire here. We've got about 3 minutes left here on 90.1 KPFT Houston. Of course, you can always find more at the HoustonFreeThinkers.com and find all the music and the articles we've been covering. Just on that one, before I hit a couple other headlines on our way out, Rolling Stone's Matt Taibbi called this new bailout of Wall Street a bailout of the last bailout in 2008. And you're right, Micah, that there's not many people who even know who BlackRock is and have realized that what the Fed's been doing lately is putting institutions like BlackRock and other financial institutions even more in control of the economy and looting the people even further. So, I mean, these are things, like you said, we're focused on masks, we're focused on arguing with each other on Facebook while we're getting robbed blind, and there's no movement there's no burgeoning movement to try to oppose it in any way. And
it's frustrating because you hear people who should be supporting the working man, working person, right, out there saying, yes, just wait for this, as if, it's, I don't know, we went through Bush, Obama, Trump. This is all the same. They're all supporting this big bankster bailout stuff that keeps happening. And I think that's right what the Rolling Stone gentleman,
absolutely.
They're just trying to, buying habits are the same. Absolutely.
I'm going to hit one more story, Mike. I know you saw this one earlier too. I think it's a really important one. We'll put these links, of course, on our Facebook page, Freethinker Radio. This one just came out this weekend, and I wrote up a piece about it, kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. It says that new reports indicate the U.S. and China actually collaborated on coronavirus research prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. Yeah, so imagine this. The United States government actually gave a $35 million grant to the Chinese government to study, $3.7 million grant, still quite a bit of money, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in Wuhan, where we're told the outbreak began. The U.S. government was funding part of research into bats, which are captured in caves in China. They were experimenting on these bats, trying to create COVID-19, coronaviruses, and we don't really know what they were doing. But apparently, according to these new documents, that they grew a strain of coronavirus and they injected it into piglets. And the piglets who died, they fed those dead piglets to the other piglets. And we still don't have the full truth about it, but it's interesting because it gives us a little more detail that these governments may have in fact been working together on experimenting on these kinds of research. And that's not what we're being told in the media. And another story you mentioned again, largest U.S. study of COVID-19 finds that the biggest chronic factor in hospitalization is older and obese people with pre-existing conditions, like you were talking about, Johnny.
So yeah, the reality is that not everybody's going to get sick. I mean, I don't mean this to be insensitive, but the evidence continues to show that people who are obese, people who have underlying health conditions, maybe people who haven't spent their life eating healthy or exercising or just generally getting some activity out. And again, we don't say that as any judgment on anybody, but we've seen also in parts of Italy where people are getting sick. There are cases of pollution. I mentioned earlier that there's a researcher talking about the effects of glyphosate and how that could be contributing to this. There are a lot of other factors that we are not seeing discussed on CNN.com or MSNBC or Fox News or any of those sort of outlets. You have to go digging. You have to ask the questions. And that's what we try to do here on Freethinker Radio. We are here every Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. Even during the quarantine, we're doing our best to pre-record these episodes. I'm in Mexico. Micah and Johnny are back in Houston. And we're making this work. And we're so thankful to everybody at 90.1 KPFT, Bobby, Don, all the team, everybody who's keeping things going so that we can get the shows out there. And of course, this is the only place in Houston that you can find a show like ours, as well as many other great shows on community-supported, commercial-free, corporate-free radio. So if you want to support KPFT, please visit kpft.org and find out more about that. If you want to find our work, you can visit thehoustonfreethinkers.com, thehoustonfreethinkers.com, and get everything that you need to know about our work there. And of course, find us on Facebook at Freethinker Radio. Find us at The Conscious Resistance on Facebook and on YouTube if you want to see the live videos. We didn't get to play much music last week, guys, so we're going to go ahead and end with 2 songs this time. And these are both songs that from artists that we've worked with quite a bit. The first one is going to be from El Jumbotron, which is Johnny's band. And the second one is from our friend Jeremy Carswell. So please enjoy this. This has been Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston. Until next time, peace.
Here's a short story about a dying hollow.